Today, I want to share the powerful story of Elena Carter, a maid who tried to hide her broken arm out of fear. But the man who employed her wasn't just any man. He was the kind of man you didn't cross. And when he saw what had been done to her, everything changed. By morning, 15 men had vanished. The city would never forget the price of hurting the wrong woman. Just a second. I just need one more second, Kate Bennett whispered to herself, pressing a trembling hand against her ribs. She needed to calm down. Her body wouldn't stop shaking. The taste of blood still lingered in her mouth. The midnight blue gown she had saved 2 months to buy was now ruined, torn at the strap, stained with something dark and wet near her hip. She didn't even want to know what it was. She couldn't go back out there like this. Not broken, not bleeding, not in front of the Blackwells. They expected perfection. For nearly 4 years, Kate had worked for the Blackwell family, starting as a temp assistant. Slowly, through late nights and tireless effort, she became their trusted event coordinator. Tonight's gala was supposed to be her biggest triumph, her final step toward promotion. With that new title, she could finally afford proper care for her sick mother and stop living in debt. She'd finally prove that the poor girl from Queens belonged in a world built for billionaires and power players, but not like this. Her eyes stung. She wiped away a tear and dabbed at her busted lip with a crumpled tissue. The bleeding wouldn't stop. She crouched lower in the corner of the storage room, hoping to disappear. Just 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes to gather herself, clean up the mess, and sneak out unnoticed. Then the door swung open. Kate spun around, heart jumping into her throat. "I'm sorry," she blurted, expecting a coworker or maybe someone from catering. But it wasn't them. A tall man filled the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light. Broad shoulders, expensive suit, cold blue eyes, Damon Blackwell. He stepped inside slowly, hand still on the doorknob. She froze. Not just any guest, he was the host, the heir to the Blackwell fortune, the man whose name never left the headlines for long, always tied to whispers of crime and corruption, but never proven. He didn't belong to polite society. He ruled it. Damon's presence was sharp and commanding, like a weapon she didn't know how to defend against. Even in his loosened tux and undone tie, he radiated power. His hair slicked back without a strand out of place, his icy eyes locked onto hers. She had only ever spoken to him a handful of times. Always brief, always polite. She never imagined being alone in a room with him like this. He didn't say a word. His gaze moved over her. Ripped dress, swollen cheek, bloody lip. His face didn't twitch, didn't show an ounce of emotion. That silence was more terrifying than a scream. "Mr. Blackwell, I can explain," she stammered. "I tripped. I'm fine. I just needed a moment before..." "Who?" One word, calm, quiet, deadly. Her throat tightened. Her back straightened instinctively, even though it sent pain shooting through her ribs. "It's nothing," she whispered. "Really. I slipped in the garage. I just needed Kate." Her name in his mouth made her freeze. It was low. Dangerous. It sounded like a warning, or maybe a promise. He stepped inside and gently closed the door behind him. Now it was just the two of them. No noise. No escape. Kate backed against a shelf. Damon stepped closer. "I'm going to ask you one more time," he said, voice like ice breaking. "Who the hell did this to you?" She flinched. Damon Blackwell, the man she had seen control boardrooms full of billionaires with a glance, had never raised his voice at anyone. Now, that control was cracking. She saw it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his fingers twitched, ready to act. "I can't," she whispered, panic rising. "Please, I can't lose this job. My mom, she's sick. I can't risk..." "Answer the question." His voice stayed low, but it dropped like a hammer. Unmoving, unrelenting. Kate shook her head desperately. "It was an accident. I slipped." Damon stepped closer, 1 foot away now. He should have terrified her. Maybe he did, but not in the way she expected. His gaze was unreadable, his fury so cold it burned. Slowly, gently, he reached up. 2 fingers touched her chin, lifting her bruised face toward the light. His touch was soft, careful, like she might shatter. And in his eyes, she saw something she had never expected from him, something terrifying, something protective. Kate didn't realize she was trembling until Damon's fingers touched her. The way he held her chin, lightly, almost respectfully, was so different from the rough hands that had slammed her into a wall barely an hour ago. His thumb hovered just beside the swelling under her eye, his touch never crossing the line into pain. "That bruise," he said, voice low and even, "came from a fist." Kate's breath hitched. He didn't wait for her to confirm. His eyes lowered, studying the split in her lip. His voice dropped even more, almost like he was speaking to himself. "The cut, that's from a ring. Whoever hit you was wearing one." Her lips parted. "How do you—" He ignored her, his gaze shifting down to her left arm. She followed his eyes and noticed for the first time the faint red marks blooming around her elbow. Finger-shaped bruises. "Someone grabbed you here," he said coldly, "hard enough to leave those." Kate felt her knees weaken. The man in front of her wasn't shouting. He wasn't pacing or making threats. He didn't need to. His stillness, his focus was far worse. It was like watching a volcano right before it exploded. "And the way you're holding your side," he added. "I'd bet you have 2 cracked ribs, at least." She blinked, stunned that he could see so much with one glance. Her arms instinctively tightened around herself. His fingers stayed at her chin, soft yet unmoving. He wasn't letting her look away. "Who did this to you?" Damon asked again, quieter now, but with so much power in the question, it made her throat go dry. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't want to say the name. Saying it made it real. Saying it meant she couldn't lie to herself anymore. But when she looked at him, this man who had every reason not to care, who most of the city feared, and saw the fury in his eyes, she broke. "Preston Caldwell," she whispered, her voice cracking. The name hung in the air like poison. "Preston," she repeated, as if spitting it out could erase what happened. "He and a few of his friends. They cornered me in the back hallway. I was just stepping out to take a call. He asked me to go with him. I said no," she swallowed hard. "He didn't like that." Damon didn't blink, didn't move. Then, slowly, like something inside him was breaking free, he pulled his hand back and stepped away from her. His expression went blank again, but not the way it had before. This wasn't emptiness. This was control, cold, terrifying control. Without a word, he slipped his hand into his tuxedo jacket, pulled out his phone, and pressed one button. "Frank," he said, voice steady and firm. "South Corridor. Bring the big first aid kit." "From my office." He paused, still watching her. "And Frank?" "Hurry." Kate clutched the edge of the shelf behind her, nails digging into the wood. Her whole body ached, but none of it compared to the whirlpool in her chest. Shame, fear, and something else. A strange, burning relief. Like someone finally saw her pain and didn't look away. "Preston Caldwell," she whispered again, mostly to herself. Damon's head tilted slightly. "The senator's son," Kate nodded. "He told me if I said anything, he'd ruin me. He said he could make sure I never worked in this city again, that no one would believe me, that it was my word against his." Damon's jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. His next words were almost gentle. "It's already a thing, Kate." She blinked. "What?" "The moment that little bastard touched you, it became my business. But I didn't ask. You didn't have to." Before she could say another word, Damon shrugged off his tuxedo jacket and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. It was heavy, warm. It smelled like him. Wood smoke and something sharp, masculine, and impossible to name. It felt like armor. "You're going to sit down," he said. "Frank will check you over. Then you're going home. But the gala, you're done for tonight. And for the next few days, paid." Kate's head spun. Nothing about this made sense. The powerful, untouchable man she only saw from a distance at events was now treating her like something precious. Fragile. Worth protecting. "Mr. Blackwell," she started. "Damon," he corrected, softer now. His eyes were still sharp, but there was something behind them, something real. He took a step closer again. "When I'm about to break 6 laws for someone," he said, "I think we can drop the formalities. And for the first time, Since it happened. Since Preston's hand had slammed into her face and shoved her to the ground, Kate felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Safe. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Safe. A knock broke the silence between them. The door creaked open again, and in stepped Frank, Damon's longtime head of security. His silver hair, sharp gaze, and perfectly pressed suit gave him the air of someone who'd handled far worse situations with nothing more than calm precision. Frank took one look at Kate. The bruises on her face, the way she was swaddled in Damon's jacket, and something in his expression darkened. Still, his tone remained respectful. "Miss Bennet," he said with a short nod. "May I?" Damon had already dragged over a low stool. Kate sat carefully, wincing as pain flared through her side. Frank knelt beside her and opened the leather medical kit, his movements practiced and unhurried. Damon didn't move far. He stayed within reach, arms crossed, watching with an intensity that made her breath catch. Frank's fingers were gentle as they pressed along her ribs. Even so, Kate couldn't stop the small cry that escaped when he touched the wrong spot. "2 cracked ribs," Frank said after a moment, grim but calm. "Severe contusions on her arm, cheek, and jaw. The cut on her lip will sting, but it's minor. She needs justice," Damon murmured beside her, his voice like a low rumble of thunder. Kate's head whipped up. Her hands trembled again. "Please," both men turned to her. Frank's expression was unreadable. Damon's, carved from stone. "I'm begging you," Kate whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't make this worse. Preston, he said if I told anyone he'd destroy me. He'll say I lied, say I tried to seduce him. He's the senator's son. He'll ruin everything." Damon's eyes narrowed, but he didn't shout. He didn't threaten. Instead, he crouched in front of her again, lowering himself slowly like she was something he was afraid to scare off. She didn't have to tilt her neck to meet his eyes this time. He took her hand gently between both of his. "Warm, strong, grounding, Kate," he said softly. One word that held something she wasn't used to hearing. Tenderness. "You've worked with my family for nearly 4 years, Damon said, voice low and steady. "You've handled 37 events. I know, I've kept count. I've watched you bend over backward for arrogant guests who didn't deserve your patience. You've smiled at people who looked right through you. And not once did you ever lose your composure." She stared at him, stunned. "You noticed? I remember everything about you," he said, lips twitching like it pained him to admit it. "I remember the time you scolded me for almost knocking over a centerpiece last winter." Her jaw dropped slightly. "You remember that? You said, 'Careful, please.' That vase is older than both of us combined." I hadn't laughed in a week, and I almost did. Kate felt herself flush despite the ache in her body. "I thought you were going to fire me." "I almost did," he said with a teasing glint in his eye. "Then I remembered no one else talks to me like I'm just a man in a suit. No fear, no flinching. You looked at me like I was human." He was quiet for a beat. Then, more serious, he added, "Do you know how rare that is for me?" She didn't, but something about the way he said it made her heart ache. "They're all afraid of me, Kate," he continued. "Some hide it better than others, but it's always there. The panic, the need to please me. They should be afraid." A sharp chill slid down her spine. The way he said it, the edge in his voice, reminded her who he really was. But then just as quickly he softened. He squeezed her hand. "You," he said, "never looked at me like I was dangerous." She looked up at him then, heart pounding. "Should I?" His jaw ticked. "Probably. I'm not a man who deserves blind trust, but I'm asking for it anyway." His other arm stayed behind her, supporting her. She realized, strangely, that this was the only place that didn't hurt. Her mind screamed that this was all happening too fast. But her body, the ache in her ribs, the sting on her lip, the tremble in her spine, told her something different. I don't know," she admitted, voice soft. "Should I trust you?" For a second, his mask cracked. She saw it, just beneath the surface. Vulnerability. "Probably not," he repeated. "But I'll earn it anyway." Her heart gave a sharp twist. "Yes," she whispered. His eyes searched hers. "Yes, I trust you. she said again. And this time she meant it, and somehow, that scared her more than anything else. Frank rose to his feet, closing the first aid kit with a soft click. He nodded once professionally. "I'll drive Miss Bennett home." Kate tried to stand, but her legs buckled slightly. Before she could fall, Damon's arm was already around her waist, steady and strong, like he'd anticipated the collapse before it happened. His other hand caught hers again, fingers threading through hers with that same impossible balance of strength and gentleness. "I can walk," she whispered, embarrassed, trying to straighten up. "You don't have to prove anything right now," he murmured. She didn't argue. As Frank stepped out to pull the car around, Damon turned to her one last time. His hand found hers again, lingering. Just before he let go, his thumb traced across her knuckles in a slow, deliberate caress that sent a shiver racing up her spine. "Take tomorrow off," he said softly. "Take the week. However long you need. Damon, He stopped her with a slight shake of his head. "Your only job right now is to heal." Kate's throat tightened. The protectiveness in his voice, it wasn't possessive. It was reverent, like she was something important, something worth protecting. "And Kate," he added, his voice dipping lower, "your mother's medical expenses. Consider them handled." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Her eyes widened. "What?" "I've taken care of it." No, you can't just—" "I can," he said, and his tone left no room for argument. "And I did." She was shaking her head, even as the tiniest flicker of relief curled warm in her chest. That dark, heavy weight that had lived on her shoulders for years, lifted in a breath. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Damon's jaw twitched. Anger flashed in his eyes, not at her but at the world. "Don't thank me," he said roughly. "Just come back when you're ready." Then he stepped back, letting Frank return and take her arm. Kate clutched Damon's jacket tighter around her body as Frank guided her quietly out of the service hall and into the night. Outside, the limousine was waiting, sleek and black, its windows tinted like obsidian. Frank helped her into the back seat with a quiet gentleness that didn't match his hard features. She sat silently, still stunned. The drive home passed in a blur. She pressed the cold pack Frank had given her to her cheek, numb in every sense of the word. Her ribs throbbed, her face pulsed, her lips stung. But it all felt distant now. What stayed with her was the heat of Damon's jacket wrapped around her. The echo of his voice when he asked her name. The way he looked at her like she was something that mattered. Back at her tiny apartment in Queens, Frank insisted on walking her all the way to her door. He did a full sweep of the place, closets, fire escape, every room, like a Secret Service agent, professional and silent. Satisfied, he placed a small card on her counter. "If you need anything," he said, voice low. "Day or night, call." She clutched the card, nodding, not trusting her voice. "Thank you, Frank." He dipped his head. "Rest well, Miss Bennett." The moment the door closed behind him, the silence of her apartment pressed in. It was too quiet, too empty. She stood there in the middle of her living room, Damon's jacket still around her shoulders. She moved to take it off, and stopped. Without thinking, she pulled it tighter around herself and sat down on the couch. She didn't even bother turning on the lights. The darkness felt better, softer. Her phone sat on the coffee table. She hadn't looked at it since before. She picked it up slowly. Missed calls, a few texts, nothing from Damon, of course. Men like him didn't make casual phone calls. He probably had people to talk for him, but still. She laid the phone down again, let her head fall back, and for the first time in what felt like years, she let the exhaustion swallow her whole. It wasn't sleep exactly, but it was something close. At 2:13 in the morning, her phone rang. She startled awake, heart thundering. The screen lit up with a number she recognized immediately, her mother's care facility. They never called this late unless something was wrong. She answered with shaking fingers. "Hello? Miss Bennett?" a warm voice said. "This is the night supervisor. I'm sorry for calling so late, but I thought you should know. Your mother's account has been paid in full." Kate sat up straight. "I what?" 6 months' worth of care, the woman said cheerfully. And a trust has been opened to cover all future costs indefinitely. The world tilted. Do you know who? The donor asked to remain anonymous, the woman replied. But everything's verified. It's all legal. I just thought you'd want to know. Kate hung up, phone slipping from her fingers. Anonymous. Right. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. He did it. Damon Blackwell didn't just promise. He acted. She sat in the dark, wrapped in his jacket, crying silent tears of relief, of disbelief, of something so big and overwhelming that it didn't have a name. Outside, the city kept breathing. But Kate knew. Tonight the world had changed, and somewhere out there, Damon was already moving. The sky was still dark when Kate gave up on trying to sleep. Her body ached in places she hadn't even known could hurt. Her ribs throbbed with every breath. Her lips stung, and the bruises on her cheek pulsed with heat. But all of it faded into the background compared to the churning storm in her chest. She'd cried herself into silence. Then sat awake, numb, for hours on the couch, Damon's jacket still wrapped tight around her like armor, like proof. She'd almost started to believe it had all been some bizarre dream. The look in his eyes, the weight of his promise, the way he'd touched her like she was made of glass. But then the phone call had come. The one from her mother's facility. That's what made it real. Her mother's account. Paid. A trust. Indefinitely. No one does that unless they mean it. Her phone buzzed again, breaking through her thoughts. A notification lit up the screen. News alert. 6 men reported missing overnight in separate incidents. Authorities. Suspect connection. Kate's blood turned to ice. She unlocked the screen with shaking fingers and tapped the alert. The article loaded, each word more surreal than the last. 6 men, all aged between their late 20s and mid-30s, were reported missing between midnight and 2 a.m. in various parts of the city. Among them, Preston Caldwell, son of New York Senator Richard Caldwell, and 2 of his close associates. Names of the remaining individuals have not yet been released, pending family notification. NYPD sources indicate that the disappearances are being treated as separate cases, but internal chatter suggests a potential coordinated effort. CCTV footage captured each man leaving restaurants, nightclubs, or private events, but none were seen again after that. At least one prominent family is expected to hold a press conference later today. Kate dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, landing face down. 6 men, gone. Her mind couldn't wrap around it. Preston, his 2 friends, and 3 more. Maybe witnesses, maybe enablers, maybe just collateral. She stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, mind blank. She should have been horrified. She should have called the police. Told someone. Done something. But what she felt instead was a slow, dark wave of something deeper than relief, satisfaction. Her phone rang again, this time with no warning. The screen lit up with a blocked number. Kate's breath caught. She already knew. She answered slowly, pressing the phone to her ear. Hello? There was a short pause, like the sound of someone adjusting their grip on the line. Then that familiar voice came through. Calm, precise, warm in a way that didn't match the cold storm she knew he kept inside. Kate. Just her name. That was all it took for her heart to start hammering again. I hope I didn't wake you, Damon said, his tone almost polite. I wasn't sleeping, she whispered, and her voice sounded steadier than she expected. Good. Another pause, like he was choosing his next words carefully. I wanted you to know. You don't need to worry anymore. Kate closed her eyes, gripping the phone tighter. The people who hurt you, he continued, still calm. They won't be a problem. Not for you, not for anyone. He said it like he was talking about removing an old piece of furniture, as if Preston Caldwell and his friends had been an inconvenience. Handled, removed, dealt with. She said nothing for a long moment. The silence between them was thick, intimate, dangerous. Then finally she spoke. Did they suffer? The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Daman didn't answer right away. Then, his voice dropped a notch, a faint note of curiosity creeping into it. Would it matter to you if they did? Yes, she said, and there was no apology in her voice. I want to know if they were afraid, if they felt what I felt. Silence. Then came his reply, low and almost reverent. They were afraid, he said. They knew exactly what was happening, and exactly why. Kate exhaled slowly, her fingers trembling around the phone. Good, she whispered, and the word didn't feel wrong. She heard him inhale sharply on the other end of the line. The smoothness in his tone cracked, just a bit. Don't thank me, he said, voice rougher now. I didn't do it for that. Then why? She asked quietly. Why go that far? There was a long pause. When Daman finally answered, his voice was soft and stripped raw of everything but truth. Because the thought of someone else touching you made me want to burn this entire city to the ground. Kate sat frozen, breath caught in her chest. He wasn't exaggerating. He meant it. Come back to work when you're ready, he added gently. Take longer if you need to. But when you do, I need to know something. She swallowed hard. What? Are you afraid of me now? The question cracked the air between them. It was heavy, fragile, and laced with something close to vulnerability. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her hand went to the lapel of his jacket still wrapped around her like a second skin. She thought of the storm in his eyes, the gentleness in his hands, the way he asked her name like it was a promise. No, she said finally. I'm not afraid of you, Daman. She heard his breath catch. You should be, he murmured. But he didn't sound disappointed. If anything, he sounded like a man who'd just won something worth dying for. 3 days later, Kate stepped into the marble lobby of Blackwell & Sons. The tall glass doors slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, sealing her into the cool, luxurious quiet of the building. Everything looked the same. Polished floors, fresh-cut flowers at the reception desk, buzzing executives in expensive suits. But the moment she swiped her employee badge, something changed. The security guard at the front desk straightened and tapped his earpiece. Miss Bennett, he said with a polite nod. Mr. Blackwell asked that you go up to see him the moment you arrived. Kate blinked. Oh, okay, sure. Her heels echoed softly as she walked toward the private elevator, her stomach flipping wildly. She hadn't expected this. She thought she'd ease in, maybe answer some emails, recheck her calendar. Instead, she was headed straight to the top floor, straight to him. The elevator doors closed around her. As it rose in smooth silence, Kate adjusted her blouse, high-collared to cover the fading bruises, and pulled her sleeves lower to hide the marks still blooming on her arms. Her cheekbone was still faintly purple, but makeup had softened it. Almost no one would notice, except him. The elevator dinged softly, and the doors opened to the executive suite. Frank was waiting in the hallway, leaning casually against the wall. He looked her over with those observant eyes, then nodded in quiet approval. Morning, Miss Bennett. Morning, Frank, she said, trying not to sound nervous. He motioned to the double doors. Go on in, he's expecting you. Kate swallowed, smoothed the front of her skirt, and stepped forward. The doors opened into a room that belonged in a castle, not an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in soft morning light. The city skyline glittered beyond the glass. Dark wood shelves lined the walls. A massive desk dominated the space, rich mahogany, topped with papers arranged with obsessive precision. Art hung on the walls. A single framed portrait of a stern-faced man she knew to be Daman's father loomed above the fireplace. And there he was, Daman Blackwell, standing with his back to her, hands in his pockets, looking out over Manhattan like he owned it. Maybe he did. Close the door, he said, without turning. Kate obeyed, the soft click of the latch sounding louder than it should have. He turned then, and the sunlight caught his profile. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, the jacket open, the white shirt beneath it crisp and unbuttoned at the collar. No tie, no need for one. His presence alone commanded more respect than any fabric ever could. His eyes landed on her. For one long second, he didn't move, didn't speak, just looked. "How are you feeling?" he asked, voice low, smooth. She stepped forward slowly. "Better. Healing. My ribs still ache a little, but I'll be okay." He nodded once, then gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Sit, please." She did, carefully, perching on the edge like she wasn't sure how close she should allow herself to be. He didn't sit. Instead, he stayed in front of his desk, holding a folder in one hand. When he opened it, her heart started pounding. "These are updates," he said. "From this weekend." She tensed. "Police reports?" "No," he said, almost amused. "From my people." He flipped the folder open with a flick of his fingers. "Preston Caldwell and his associates have now been officially declared missing persons." Kate's breath caught. Dahman glanced up at her. "I take it you saw the news?" She nodded. "Yeah, no leads," he said flatly. "No credible tips. Nothing on camera after 2 a.m. Senator Caldwell has called in every favor he has. FBI, state police, private investigators. He's clawing at shadows." There was a cruel flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Nothing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing," Dahman repeated. He closed the folder and set it aside. "Some people just disappear." Kate felt a cold shiver crawl across her skin. She stared at the folder, then slowly looked up. "Where are they?" He blinked once, surprised. "Do you really want to know?" She hesitated. "Did she? I think I need to know, so I can stop wondering if I should feel guilty." Dahman didn't move. Then, in 3 smooth steps, he was in front of her, close enough to steal her breath. He dropped to one knee, bringing himself level with her, eyes locked on hers. "They're alive," he said softly. "They're far from here. Places where very powerful people will make sure they stay forgotten." Kate inhaled sharply. He reached up and gently cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed the edge of her face, featherlight, her face, featherlight. "They'll remember what they did to you every day for the rest of their miserable lives. That's their sentence." Her heart stuttered in her chest. Tears filled her eyes. "Does that make me awful?" she whispered. "That I'm glad?" He shook his head slowly. "No, it makes you honest." She leaned into his touch, her pain melting into his hand. "I feel safe," she breathed. His eyes darkened with something feral. "Dangerous answer," he growled low. Her heart skipped a beat. Not from fear, from something far deeper, desire, danger, devotion, and maybe the beginning of something she never thought she'd feel again. Trust. Kate wasn't sure who moved first. One second, Dahman's hand was cradling her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tear that slipped down her skin. The next, his fingers were curling into her hair, gentle but firm, tipping her face up toward his. His voice was quiet, but every word hit like a thunderclap. "I knew the moment I saw you in that storage closet. Bruised, bleeding, and still standing tall, I knew you were different." Kate's breath trembled. "Different how?" "Fearless," he said. "Braver than you should be. And maybe just foolish enough to look at a man like me and not flinch." He leaned in slightly, and his forehead rested against hers. "I knew the second I touched you," he whispered. "I'd never be able to let you go." Kate's hands moved on their own. One slipped up to the back of his neck. The other gripped the front of his shirt, knuckles brushing against the expensive fabric. She wasn't trembling anymore. Not from fear. Not from pain, only from him. His lips brushed hers, just a breath of contact. "A question," Kate answered by pressing her mouth to his. The kiss started soft, gentle, testing, but it didn't stay that way. Dahman made a low, growling sound deep in his chest. His arms wrapped around her in a swift, sure motion, pulling her out of the chair and into his lap as if she weighed nothing. The movement startled a gasp from her, and he swallowed it with a fiercer kiss. There was nothing polite about it. It was bruising, desperate, and scorching. And she kissed him back just as fiercely. Her fingers curled into his hair, lips parting beneath the demanding sweep of his mouth. She felt the sharp contrast between the smooth silk of his vest and the solid warmth of his chest beneath it. His grip on her waist was possessive but careful, always aware of her injuries. When they broke apart, gasping, Kate barely recognized her own voice. "What are we doing?" Damon's breath was ragged as he cupped the side of her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. "Whatever this is, it isn't temporary," he said, his voice hoarse with need. "I'm not playing games with you." "Kate, you've been my boss for years," she whispered. "I stopped thinking of you as just an employee a long time ago." She stared at him, heart pounding. "Then why now?" she asked. "Why after all this time?" His lips pressed to her temple, a kiss so reverent it made her eyes sting. "Because what happened to you ripped something open in me," he murmured, "and I realized I couldn't stand another second of pretending I didn't care." Kate swallowed the lump in her throat. "People fear you," she said quietly. "And they should." His eyes burned into hers. "Yes, but you never did." "Maybe I should have." "Maybe," he echoed. "But you didn't. And now you're the only person in this entire city who looks at me like I'm not a monster." Her hand slid down the side of his face, fingers grazing the edge of his jaw. "You did something terrible for me." "I did what had to be done," he said, no shame in his voice. "They hurt you. That was never going to be forgiven." She leaned forward again, pressing her forehead to his. Her next words came in a whisper. "I'm not afraid of you, Damon." His eyes darkened. "Say it again." "I'm not afraid of you." He kissed her again. Slower this time, with purpose, with control. And Kate let herself melt into it, into him, into the fire and safety that only he seemed capable of offering. By the time they pulled apart, both breathless, she could barely remember what life looked like before this man decided she was his. He rose to his feet, still holding her in his arms, then gently set her back in the leather chair. She was dizzy with adrenaline and something far warmer, affection, safety, the promise of something dark and fiercely protective blooming around her. He knelt again, as he had in the closet, and slowly took off her heels, one at a time. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're Damon Blackwell," she murmured, "and you're on your knees." "I kneel for no one," he said, glancing up at her with heat in his eyes. "Except you." She felt that in every inch of her. He stood, removed his suit jacket, and gently placed it over her shoulders like a blanket. "You're staying here today," he said. "No arguments, no work. Just rest. And you?" she asked. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. And as he sat beside her, slipping an arm around her back, drawing her close to his chest, Kate closed her eyes and breathed him in. Power, danger, safety, all wrapped into one impossible man. And for the first time in her entire life, she felt like she belonged. A week later, the city was on fire, not literally, but politically, socially, and in every newspaper that mattered. The disappearance of Senator Caldwell's son had cracked open a hive of corruption, blackmail, and backroom deals no one had been ready to face. One by one, secrets poured out. Money laundering, abuse allegations, coercion, sex trafficking rings linked to elite donors. And right at the center of it all, Preston Caldwell. Or rather, his absence. Kate sat in the penthouse lounge of the Blackwell building, watching the news scroll across the screen in glowing red letters. Breaking. Senator Caldwell resigns amid corruption scandal. Dozens expected to face charges. She turned the volume down and leaned back, still cradling the coffee Damon had handed her 20 minutes ago. Black, 2 sugars, just how she liked it. The air smelled of leather, expensive cologne, and fresh ink from the morning papers. The world was changing, because of her, because of Damon, because power doesn't just shift, it bleeds. The soft click of the door behind her made her glance up. Damon walked in with that same quiet authority he always carried, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, sleeves rolled to his forearms, tie long discarded. He looked tired but victorious. "They're coming after me next," he said without a trace of concern. Kate raised an eyebrow. Senator Caldwell? Filing lawsuits, accusations, desperation. Do you care? No. He sank onto the couch beside her, resting his arm behind her. I've been waiting for a war, Kate sipped her coffee. And now you have one. He looked over at her. Does that scare you? She thought for a long moment. No, she said finally. It used to. Not anymore. He studied her with that unnerving gaze, the one that saw through every layer she tried to hide behind. You've changed. I had to, she replied. This world doesn't make room for fragile women. Daman leaned closer, his voice low. You were never fragile. Her lips curved slightly. You just didn't notice. I notice everything about you now. She set her mug down. Her voice softened. You risked everything for me. I'd do it again, he said simply. You turned a scandal into an empire. He chuckled once. I cleaned up my city. She shifted to face him fully. So what happens now? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Kate's heart stopped. Daman, he opened it, but there was no ring. Instead, inside was a gold key to his penthouse, to his world, to him. Her eyes flicked to his. What does this mean? He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers again, like that first night in the supply room. It means you don't have to be alone anymore. It means I'm not letting you disappear into the background again. It means, if you want it, I'm yours. Kate felt something heavy and aching unravel in her chest. 1,000 fears she didn't have names for. 1,000 dreams she'd never dared to admit. She took the key. Then I'm yours too, she whispered. He kissed her, not with the fury of a man driven by revenge, but with the calm devotion of someone who had already won. The city could rage. Politicians could fall. Headlines would come and go. But here, in this high glass tower above the chaos, something real had bloomed. It hadn't started gently. It had started with blood, with bruises, with silence and pain, and a storm no one had seen coming. But from that wreckage, something powerful had been born, a vow, a warning, a promise, touch her again, and vanish. And now, the woman who once feared she'd be broken forever, she sat beside the most dangerous man in the city, his jacket draped over her, his world in her hands, unafraid, unapologetic, and absolutely untouchable.